Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our third segment of the day, and we're updating you all on the Super Bowl odds before Week 18, and before we get into the postseason, before everything's all decided. Remember, all of these kind of projections and Vegas projections as well were written well before today, so remember that these could be ever changing, and I don't necessarily like this top 5 as much as I thought I would coming into this show, but ultimately this is the top 5 we have for today. So without further ado, let's jump right into it, starting off with the 5th place team based off of Vegas's odds that I found, the Baltimore Ravens. And I really like this football team at plus 750 as a not necessarily a dark horse contender, because everyone really likes this Baltimore team and likes what Lamar Jackson has been doing. But I do feel like the reason why they're a dark horse contender this year is because of that defensive decline. They still have a lot of elite talent. Madubuike, Marlon Humphrey in the secondary. But it just needs to come together, because there are so many more ways to attack this Ravens secondary, because they don't necessarily trust the back end as much. And this linebacker core lost a lot of its depth last year. They lost Patrick Queen. They lost Roquan. Well, they have Roquan Smith, but ultimately he hasn't necessarily been the same as Patrick Queen was last year. They still had Madubuike, and he still had a decent year being named to the Pro Bowl, but still, I do feel like this Baltimore Ravens defense might let it down. This offense may have to make every game a shootout where Lamar Jackson is completely on his game and Derrick Henry adds a nice balance to keep possession of the football for as long as possible for them to really try and run through this gauntlet that is the AFC. So that's why they kind of sit at the 5th position, not necessarily breaking into the upper echelon of teams here. So that's why I feel like this Baltimore Ravens team is hard done by the Vegas odds, but kind of in a way that makes a little sense based off of what we've seen defensively from them. If they put it all together, then by all means necessary, this could be a Super Bowl team, because Lamar Jackson is playing at an MVP caliber level, and I love what Derrick Henry has been for this offense, even after I said I was a little bit skeptical about that move. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the complementary football here, because if the defense complements this offense, then this could be a unit that's clicking, but I haven't seen it thus far consistently. So that's why I sit at number 5 in Vegas and in my mind as well. Then number 4, a team that definitely looking like one of the hottest in the league, prove they can go 3 deep at quarterback in their win against the Cowboys, maybe not wanting to rely on that as much and want all of their quarterbacks as healthy as possible for this postseason push. But the Philadelphia Eagles certainly feel like a very deep football team. I really love what I'm seeing from Philly, the multiplicity of this offense, what Saquon Barkley means to this offense. Ultimately, not going to be able to go for the record. They're going to be resting him for the postseason run, but ultimately, still a team that I feel puts it all together on the football field. Complementary defense, multifaceted offense, but ultimately, where I do see deficiency is in the pass game. And I'm not saying that Jalen Hurts is a bad passer of the football, but ultimately they don't rely on it too much to where Jalen Hurts can develop into a rhythm. They really rely on Saquon almost a little bit too much in terms of what they do moving the football. And I do think that is a positive in some regards, because running the football means you retain the football, keep opposing offenses off the field. And if you're in the NFC, that's going to matter a lot, because all of these offenses are capable of scoring 30 to 40 points per game. And so if you're Philly and you know that you're relying on a guy like Saquon a lot, it makes sense to rest him and ultimately to make sure that his role is as important as not just making explosive plays, but also retaining the football, because that's what Philly can do better than anyone, in my opinion, in the NFC field. But ultimately, Jalen Hurts is going to be asked to pass a little bit more come postseason time. And if he isn't prepared for that, prepared to carry that load, that's where I can see the Eagles season hitting some roadblocks. Yes, there are some defenses that you feel you can take advantage of in the pass game, the Lions notwithstanding. But ultimately, I do feel like Philly is going to have to rely on complementing this run game. And starts with Jalen Hurts taking up a bigger role come postseason time in this offense. And I do believe that he can be ready for it. We've seen that he can make certain throws, but ultimately we've also seen some uncomfortable moments from him this season as well. So that's why I kind of have my trepidations about Philly, but they are playing fantastic football. And you can say they're playing the best football in the NFC down the stretch. But I still have to see every single cog in the machine click, because Jalen Hurts really needs to develop that rhythm, like I said, in order for this run to bear fruit here, because I do think that they are a true Super Bowl contender, deserving of being in the top 5. And that's why I feel like any team from the NFC can compete. But the Eagles, because of what we've seen from them repeatedly, relying on Saquon, give me a little bit of trepidation in terms of a postseason stretch, rather than using him all regular season, because of the fact that you need to pass to win sometimes come postseason time. So that's my only caveat with this plus 600 Philadelphia Eagles team. Then number 3, this is a team that I really think a lot of people are getting on the hype train for. And I do think that it could seemingly be their year. They just have to play their brand of football, and ultimately they should be fine. The Buffalo Bills should be fine. At plus 450, I do feel like Josh Allen and this offense are looking like the best they've ever been in this era for Josh Allen. Joe Brady doing a remarkable job with this offense, really kind of moving past the tension that a guy like Stephon Diggs created there, and really looking at ways to A, make Josh Allen look good still, and B, limit the turnovers, because that was a big problem the past couple of seasons in Buffalo. My only caveat here as well is the defense. Yes, they look pretty good against the Jets, but they're the Jets this season, and the Jets this season do not look that good. So I do feel like this defense needs to prove against playoff caliber offenses that they're willing and able to complement this Buffalo offense, because the Buffalo offense really is clicking on all fronts here. Yes, they've had some questionable games, and yes, Josh Allen can put up the occasional stinger, but ultimately he's playing an MVP caliber level, and in order to not waste this season, that defense really needs to be the difference in the postseason. They're going to be facing teams like the Ravens potentially. They'll be facing a Chiefs offense that we know can get hot come playoff time. So they need to be primed and ready to go on the defensive side of the football to prepare for the multiplicity of these offenses. And I do think they have the depth and talent there, but it's all going to come down to how they plan week in, week out for these these offenses, because that's going to be the key. That's always going to be the key in the NFL. Defense is what wins games. And as much as I think this Buffalo offense can put up as many points as possible in order to ensure they win football games, I still think that this defense is going to be under heavy scrutiny. And that's why I feel like a lot of people might have apprehension placing their bets on this Buffalo Bills team, even though I still think they have all to play for. And it certainly seems like at some point you feel they're going to break through, especially in this year when the Chiefs are looking a little bit more vulnerable than usual, and there really isn't necessarily a quote-unquote top team in the AFC I can point to. So Buffalo had to take advantage of that, but they're going to have to play complementary football along the way. Then at number 2, let's talk about those aforementioned Kansas City Chiefs, because at plus 450 at number 2 overall on this list, a lot of people might be a little skeptical about that. But they've earned the number 1 seed. They're a 15-1 football team looking to go 16-1 in a regular season. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in number 15. They have one of the best defensive coordinators, especially come postseason time, in Steve Spagnuolo. They have weapons that they feel can grow into the postseason. Travis Kelce, yes, he's been showing signs of age, but he's been one of the best postseason performers of all time. Xavier Worthy, a very multifaceted talent who, if they utilize his speed correctly, could be a huge weapon. DeAndre Hopkins, one of the NFL's most underrated receivers over these past couple of years, over this past decade, whether it be in Houston to Tennessee to now. So, you feel that even though they haven't been the most convincing 15-1 football team by a long shot, this team is going to catch fire come postseason. But I do feel like in order for that to happen, in order for the three-peat to really become possible, this Chiefs team can't get in its own way. What I mean by that is they have to start thinking about just treating this postseason like any other postseason. Because if they let talks of three-peat get to them, that's where I kind of feel like they'll get caught up in the moment. Now, I do feel that Andy Reid and his coaching staff has done a great job to combat that, to kind of ease them into this postseason. And they've earned this kind of quote-unquote week in bye week where they're resting all their starters and preparing them for this grueling postseason run. But I do feel like when you're a team on the precipice of history, those thoughts can begin to seep in. And that's where self-doubt can be created. And it may not be something that shows on the football field, but externally there's going to be a lot of noise. So if the Chiefs can handle that well, what they've done in this dynastic run so far, then they should be fine. But I still think that in this very muddy AFC, there are opportunities for other teams to potentially get them on a bad day. Whereas before, the Chiefs just through magic by hook or by crook got the job done. Now it just feels like there are certain teams waiting to pounce. And so that's why I feel like the Chiefs just need to play within themselves in order to truly combat all of that. But I still think they're a viable second contender here, but not necessarily a number one contender, because this Detroit Lions team feels like a team of destiny no matter how many injuries they have. And so that's why I think that this is an apt number one. Maybe not a number one that a lot of people will be feeling confident in now, because they could be looking at the 5 seed and going on the road to face a very tough Bucs team that has beaten them this season, or a Rams team that has a defense that can pressure Jared Goff like all hell. But ultimately, I do feel like this Detroit Lions team can find a path to the Super Bowl. And it's through outscoring every opponent they will face. Because this offense under Ben Johnson has been one of the most creative, unique offenses in the NFL. And they've found balance this season, unlike anything I've ever seen before out of them. Because not only have they utilized this wide receiver core to the best of its abilities, using the multiplicity of someone like an Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, but they also really leaned heavily into the running game as well. And while David Montgomery's out for the season, Jahmyr Gibbs is more than capable of carrying the load there as well. So this is a multi-talented team on the other side of the football. The defense, yes, going to have to step up, especially in the secondary, because that's where a lot of their strengths still lie. They still have Brian Branch healthy. They still have Kirby Joseph healthy. They still have Melifonwu. They still have Terrion Arnold healthy. That's where they need to rely on the depth of that secondary to come through for them. But ultimately, I still think they should be primed and prepared for a deep playoff run as well. So that's why I feel they remain number one, and they just need to lean into this offense, because this offense can put up points on anyone and force anyone to play catch-up in the NFC. And that's why I still feel like the Lions are viable options. But let me know what you think. Potentially in next week's comments about these updated Super Bowl odds. But coming up next, we'll be talking about an important match between these Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings for the NFC number one seed on Sunday Night Football. Should be a good game. We'll be right back to talk about it after this short break.